July 2, 1943, Castelvetrano Airfield, Sicily. A lone FW-190 rolls into an intercept, confident and fast. He never sees the P-40 Warhawk dropping from high sun. Tracers stitch the air. Metal tears. The German fighter spirals into the Sicilian hills. At the controls is First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, 22 years old, Brazil, Indiana. His victory marker will be more than a symbol. To Luftwaffe staff officers, it will be something they had insisted could not happen. A black American fighter pilot just shot down one of their elite. That afternoon, crews paint a small swastika below Hall's cockpit. It becomes the first tally in a ledger that will climb to 112 destroyed enemy aircraft. And the men flying with him? The Germans will reportedly give them a name. Schwarze Vogelmenschen, Black Birdmen. In a war built on ideology, the sky has just started arguing with the ground. Nazi racial doctrine called black people Untermensch, unfit for mastery of complex machines, incapable of courage under fire. But ideas do not fight. People do. In the Mediterranean summer of 1943, discipline, training, and will begin rewriting somebody else's theory. The pilots who climb to meet German interceptors are not a curiosity. They are a force. They come from Tuskegee, Alabama, trained longer, judged harder, and burdened with a second mission no other American unit carries. Prove an entire people's capability every time the wheels leave the runway. By the time bomber crews learn the truth about the men guarding them, numbers will begin to speak with a voice of their own. 15,000 sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 aerial victories, and a bomber loss rate dramatically lower than average. Ideology is loud on paper. Reality is louder in the gun camera. The journey begins long before Hall's burst of fire. In 1925, an official report titled Employment of Negro Manpower in War concludes that black Americans lack the intellect for technical roles and the courage for combat leadership. The doors of American flight schools stay shut, and yet, in the spaces where the doors closed, windows open. Eugene Bullard flies for France in World War I because America refuses him. Bessie Coleman earns a pilot's license in France in 1921 because no U.S. school will accept her. By the 1930s, Chicago's Coffey School of Aeronautics is training black civilian pilots, proof with propellers. Civil rights leaders, A. Philip Randolph, Walter White, William Hastie, press the case. If America will fight for democracy abroad, it must allow it in the cockpit. On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 forces an opening. Federal pilot training must include schools for black students. It's grudging, it's segregated, but it's a beginning. January 16, 1941. The War Department announces the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. The fine print calls it an experiment. Its commander is Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., son of America's first black general. At West Point, classmates gave him the silent treatment for 4 years. No words outside official duty. He learned to live inside quiet and keep marching. April 1943. The 99th arrives in North Africa attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Momyer, a skeptic who keeps them on marginal missions over water and coastlines. June 2nd, 1943. Their first combat, Pantelleria. German fighters appear. The 99th holds tight formation, protects the bombers, breaks clean. No kills, no losses. But discipline has a sound. The enemy hears it. A month later, Hall writes the sentence that changes everything. Mission 8. B-25s are withdrawing after striking Castelvetrano. 2 FW-19s slide in behind the bombers. Hall moves. I headed for the space between fighters and bombers, turned inside the Jerry, fired a long burst, saw him fall. When Hall lands, the base erupts. Ground crews who have carried months of insults from white personnel finally have an answer that fits on a single line. Confirmed. It is the first aerial kill by a black U.S. fighter pilot. Not a footnote. A starting pistol. But opposition at home is not done. Momier files a report. The 99th lacks aggressiveness. Headquarters sharpens the axe. Then the Axis makes a different plan. January 27, 1944. Anzio. The Luftwaffe throws weight against the Allied beachhead. The 99th Flying Tired P-40S meets FW-190S in stacked, chaotic furballs. Across 2 days, the 99th claims 8 to 13 victories. Sources vary, including 2 more for Hall. The experiment bleeds German aluminum into the sea. The War Department runs the numbers, compares the 99th to other P-40 squadrons, and writes what should have been obvious: performance equal to white units. The shut door doesn't swing, it shatters. In May 1944, the 99th merges with the 100th, 301st, and 302nd to form the 332nd Fighter Group. The mission changes from proving themselves to protecting everyone else. Ramatelli Airfield, Italy. Davis gathers his pilots. Our job is not to be aces, he says. Our job is to bring the bombers home. Escorting heavy bombers is a different kind of war. It demands patience over glory, discipline over headlines. The Luftwaffe knows that separating escorts from bombers is the kill. Davis writes a new law. Do not be lured away. Hold the formation. Block the path. Live in the blind spots of the enemy, not your pride. In June 1944, the 15th Air Force assigns group markings. The 332nd receives red, not just spinners and bands, but entire tail sections painted crimson. Soon, bomber crews don't know who's in those fighters. They only know a truth that spreads like a rumor with wings. The red tails don't leave you. Request the red tails if you can get them. July 18, 1944. Davis leads 66 Mustangs to meet bombers bound for Memmingen. The rendezvous is late. He orbits in enemy airspace rather than turn back, a decision that accepts risk to avoid disaster. When the bombers finally appear, so do roughly 100 German fighters. The fight is immediate and three-dimensional. The 332nd claims 11 to 12 victories, but the cost is awful. 15 B-17 fall in 20 minutes, and 3 red-tail pilots do not return. Critics call it failure, proof that black pilots can't handle a major battle. Operational analysis says otherwise. The 332nd joined a slaughter already in motion and prevented a rout. Real war rarely matches neat theories. The red tails still hold to theirs, stay with the bombers. By early 1945, conventional German fighters are running out of sky. Then comes the Me-262, a jet that can simply run away from propellers. March 24, 1945. The 332nd escorts bombers 1,600 miles round trip to Berlin. Intelligence warns that JG-7 will send jets. They do. The largest force of 262s yet assembled. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown has studied them. They're faster, he says, so don't chase. Cut the corner. Turn into the blind spot Brown climbs, fires 3 long bursts, and watches the jet's pilot bail out. Lieutenant Earl Lane uses the new K-14 computing gun sight to make a 2,000-yard deflection shot, the kind instructors call theoretical. Lieutenant Charles Brantley takes the third. 3 jets in 1 day. More Me-262S than many fighter groups will destroy in the entire war. The 332nd earns a Distinguished Unit citation. Berlin earns a lesson in humility. Not every fight ends in victory. 32 Tuskegee pilots become POWs. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson is shot down on August 12, 1944. At interrogation, a German officer knows his commander's name, his base, even his mother's maiden name. The intelligence is terrifyingly precise. Inside Stalag Luft III, Jefferson is treated like any other officer. White American POWs, bomber crewmen, seek him out to say thank you for the red tail escorts. In segregated America, these conversations would have been unlikely. In a Nazi camp, they happen as a matter of course. When Jefferson returns home, reality reasserts itself immediately. Segregated lines at disembarkation. The irony lands harder than flak. Abroad, an enemy acknowledges your skill. At home, many deny you exist. By mid-1944, the Red Tails had already earned a reputation that traveled faster than any radio signal. Bomber crews, weary, anxious, haunted by losses, began to notice something different whenever the Crimson Tails appeared beside their formations. They didn't wander off for easy kills. They didn't chase headlines. They stayed. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. had carved that order into every pilot's brain. No matter what happens, stay with the bombers. It went against instinct. Fighter pilots were hunters, trained to chase and destroy. But the Red Tails fought with a different mission. Discipline over glory. Success measured not in victories, but in lives saved. At first, some bomber crews didn't even know their escorts were black. They just knew those red-tailed Mustangs never left their side, even when German fighters tried to bait them away. And when the bombers landed, battered but alive, someone would always mutter the same line. The Red Tails brought us home. Soon, mission requests started arriving from bomber commanders. If possible, assign the Red Tails. From the airfields of Italy to the skies above Austria, the message spread. If you saw crimson tails weaving through the flak clouds, there was hope. The Red Tails weren't just fighting the Luftwaffe anymore. They were rewriting the definition of trust in war. Late summer, 1944. The 332nd Fighter Group was now flying P-51 Mustangs, sleek, powerful, and deadly. With their range, densis extended to more than 1,600 miles, the Red Tails could escort bombers all the way to targets deep inside the Reich. Munich, Vienna, Regensburg, Berlin. These weren't routine flights, they were endurance tests. 6, sometimes 7 hours in the air. Freezing temperatures, constant engine vibration, oxygen masks that burned your lungs after hours of use. Each mission was a psychological marathon. Flak bursts like black flowers, shrapnel tearing through the air. German interceptors appearing as dark specks on the horizon, splitting into dozens of attacking pairs. The Red Tails' discipline held. Instead of scattering, they moved like a single living organism. Rotating positions, covering each other's blind spots, blocking attacks with perfect timing. Bomber losses dropped dramatically. The Luftwaffe began to identify them by color. Rot Schwänze, red tails, and avoided head-on clashes when possible. But the Tuskegee pilots kept coming. Each time they took off, they carried two burdens: the safety of hundreds of bomber crews and the weight of proving, once again, that skill and courage had no color. When the bombers returned home, their gunners often refused to leave their stations until they saw the crimson glint of the Red Tails circling above. That was the signal. The mission was over. They'd made it. By 1945, the Allies controlled the skies, but the war wasn't done testing them. The Luftwaffe unveiled its last weapon, the Messerschmitt, Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. It climbed faster, flew higher, and could outrun any Allied aircraft by nearly 200 miles per hour. When the first reports came in, many dismissed them as exaggerations. But the Red Tails soon learned the truth. They saw silver flashes tearing through formations before vanishing into clouds, leaving burning bombers behind. Then came March 24th, 1945. Colonel Davis led 43 red-tail Mustangs on a mission to escort B-17s striking Berlin's Daimler-Benz tank factory a 1,600-mile round trip. As they approached Berlin, the air was already alive with tracer fire, and then the unthinkable: jets, dozens of them. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown was ready. He had studied how the Me-262s attacked. High-speed passes, wide turns. He rolled into a climb, cut across their path, and fired. His tracers hit home. A fireball bloomed in the sky. Minutes later, Earl Lane and Charles Brantley each scored their own jet kills. All in one mission. 3. Me-262S, destroyed in a single engagement, more than most entire groups ever managed. When they landed, Davis didn't give speeches, he simply nodded. The scoreboard said enough. That day, the Red Tails proved that even the future couldn't outrun them. Behind every red tail in the sky stood a dozen unsung heroes on the ground. The mechanics, armorers, radio techs, and crew chiefs. The men who made sure every aircraft came home ready to fight again. Ramitelli Airfield wasn't much. Dirt runways, tents for hangars, constant mud when it rained. But it was their world. Engines roared day and night. Wrenches clattered. The smell of oil and sweat hung thick in the air. Most of the 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen weren't pilots. They were the invisible backbone that kept the 332nd flying. Supplies were scarce. They often rebuilt engines from scavenged parts, patching bullet holes with scrap metal from wrecked planes. But somehow, the Red Tails maintained one of the highest aircraft readiness rates in the entire 15th Air Force. When a fighter limped home riddled with holes, ground crews would cheer. They'd rush to it before the propeller even stopped turning, checking oil leaks, counting hits, arguing about which mechanic would fix it first. They worked through exhaustion, through air raids, through grief. On March 24th, 1944, a German bombing strike hit Ramitelli directly. Several men were killed, but the survivors dragged burning planes away from fuel dumps, saving dozens more. They rarely made headlines. But without them, the Red Tails would have been grounded, and history would have been very different. The Tuskegee Airmen fought two wars simultaneously, one against the Axis in the skies and one against prejudice at home. Even as news of their victories reached American shores, many still refused to believe black pilots existed. Mainstream newspapers gave them barely a paragraph. But black America celebrated them like champions. The Pittsburgh Courier and Chicago Defender ran front-page stories under the banner Double V, Victory Abroad and Victory at Home. For millions, the Red Tails weren't just soldiers. They were proof that excellence was the ultimate argument. Still, racism found ways to follow them. In Italy, some white officers refused to share mess halls or facilities with them. Yet in combat, the same men who looked down on them on the ground owed their lives to them in the sky. The irony ran deep. The German pilots they fought often showed more professional respect than some of their own countrymen. Captured German reports even referred to them by nickname: Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. Back home, segregation remained law. But cracks were forming. Cracks carved by courage, one mission at a time. May 1945. Germany surrendered. The Red Tails had flown over 15,000 combat sorties, destroyed over 100 enemy aircraft, and lost only 27 bombers to enemy fighters. Their combat record was one of the finest in all the U.S. Army Air Forces. But when the war ended, there were no parades waiting for them. No headlines, no medals in front of cheering crowds. They returned to a country that still treated them as second-class citizens. At demobilization centers, they were sent to segregated lines. Some officers were refused service in restaurants that hung white-only signs outside. The applause that should have followed them home never came. For years, their names disappeared into silence. The military called them an experiment concluded, but those who had flown with them never forgot. Bomber crews still told stories of the Red Tails. The Crimson Guardians who had kept them alive. In living rooms and hangars and quiet conversations, their legend survived, waiting for a time when the truth would finally be heard. History moves slowly, but justice eventually takes flight. In 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981, ending segregation in the U.S. Armed Forces. The decision was shaped by one undeniable truth. The Tuskegee Airmen had proven in blood and courage that ability knows no race. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. became the first black general in the U.S. Air Force. Many others went on to become engineers, educators, and community leaders, quietly carrying their legacy into peacetime. Decades later, the world finally caught up. In 2007 in Washington, D.C., hundreds of aging Tuskegee Airmen gathered, some in wheelchairs, others standing tall in their red jackets. As President George W. Bush awarded them the Congressional Gold Medal, for a few moments the nation stood still. Applause echoed through the hall as men who had once been ignored were finally honored as heroes. Roscoe Brown spoke for all of them when he said, "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all three." The story of the Red Tails isn't just about aircraft or aerial victories. It's about the power of discipline, dignity, and determination. They were forged in injustice, tested in fire, and proven in history. And when their crimson wings cut across the European sky, they carried more than bombs or bullets. They carried the proof that freedom, once earned, belongs to everyone,